Why I joined the ROTC parallels much of what National Guardsmen's, the reason they joined the National Guard in their states. It was Depression time. Nobody had any money. Nobody had any clothes. And if you joined a military unit, they were issued World War II Army uniforms, which is what we used in the ROTC unit. I was drafted, and when I was drafted, I was sent to California for training, and I was only there about 6 weeks when the war broke out. And then it was a real scramble then as to where the Japs were headed. Nobody knew. And the West Coast was a consternation because everybody had to be on lookout, and the troops were all put on the highest points of the mountain ranges they could find to overlook the western coast. And I was one of those up on top of the mountains in the dead of night, and also in the winter. In the daytime, it was always pretty warm, but at nighttime it gets pretty cold out there. We were all up and dressed, and we already had early breakfast, and it was Sunday, and everybody was either going to town or lolling around the barracks doing something. And I was laying on my barracks reading the Sunday comics, my favorite paper. And while I was laying there, I could hear a radio going down the other end of the barracks, and the fellas down there playing craps, playing cards. And all of a sudden, an announcement was the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. We're at war. And it was all consternation with everybody wondering what's happening next. For those that were in camp, they were immediately called together and issued rifles and given instructions and boarded trucks to go out on the hills all around the California coastline. I remember when we were coming into Port Moresby, first thing I saw was two sunken ships just off the pier that led into town. And eventually we were able to disembark there and go into town, and then we were trucked out to a camp a few miles out of town. And I think we were there for about 3 days, and then we got air transportation, and we flew into combat on a beat-up old Lockheed Hudson bomber with no wings, with no windows, no doors, one Bren gun on each side of the plane, pilot and a co-pilot, and one sergeant serving every other kind of duty he had there. And his first admonishment to us was, if you see a Japanese plane, grab one of the guns and start shooting. Hell, we'd never seen one of those guns. They were all Vickers machine guns, and we'd never seen one. But I venture to say, had we been able, we'd have figured it out in a hurry and start shooting. We're taken over to a position and issued hand grenades. And by this time, it was probably around 4 in the afternoon, 4:30, somewhere in there. And I remember I was issued a whole case of ammunition, of hand grenades, 36 of them. And when I followed my sergeant, we were told, you see that mound out there? Underneath that mound is a foxhole with 2 men in it. It was the farthest outpost. And he says, you're going to go out there and you're going to relieve one of the men. I get in the hole and I'm kind of jittery and everything else. And this fellow was so tired, he just went back to sleep. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden it starts getting dark. And as it gets dark, it gets cold in the jungle. And particularly if it's raining and gets wet, then it gets real cold. And but then it did not rain that night, But all night long, I heard everything that happened in the jungle. I heard animals running around there. I heard Japs talking. I heard movements that could be Japanese, I'm not sure. But they were too close for comfort. And by morning, 36 grenades were gone. I fired them all during the night. That's true, I just lobbed them over.